When I got promoted, my in-laws scoffed. "You'll never balance work and marriage," they warned. Months later, they showed up unannounced. "We're here to save your marriage," they declared. But their plan to help ended in a way no one expected. I'm a 38-year-old woman, married to my husband, Mark, for 12 years. We live in a quiet suburb of Columbus, Ohio. I work in healthcare administration at a mid-sized hospital downtown. Mark is a high school history teacher. We have 2 kids, Lily, 10, and Ben, 7. About a year ago, I was promoted to Director of Operations. It was a big deal, more responsibility, longer hours, but also a significant pay raise. I was thrilled. Mark was supportive, proud even. But his parents? Not so much. His mother, Susan, called me the day after I got the promotion. "Congratulations," she said, her tone flat. "But are you sure this is the right move? Your children need their mother." His father, George, chimed in during a family dinner. "It's hard enough keeping a marriage together these days. With you working more, well, I hope you know what you're doing." I brushed it off. They've always been traditional, believing the woman should stay home. But Mark and I had always shared responsibilities. He was more than capable of handling things at home when I was busy. 3 months into my new role, things were hectic but manageable. Mark and I coordinated schedules, the kids were thriving, and despite the occasional late night, we were doing well. Then, one Friday evening, as I was preparing to leave the office, my phone buzzed. "We're here." It was a text from Susan. Confused, I called her. "Here where?" "At your house, dear. We thought we'd surprise you. We're here to help. To save your marriage." I was stunned. They had driven from their home in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, without informing us. When I arrived home, they were already settled in the guest room, their luggage unpacked. Susan was in the kitchen, rearranging my spice rack. George was in the living room, lecturing Mark about the importance of family dinners. "We noticed the strain," Susan said. "Thought we'd step in before things got worse." I looked at Mark, expecting him to be as surprised as I was. But he looked resigned. "They called me earlier," he admitted. "I didn't think they'd actually come." Over the next few days, our home turned into a battleground. Susan took over the kitchen, criticizing my meal choices. George insisted on leading nightly family meetings, discussing issues he perceived in our marriage. They questioned our parenting, our schedules, even our choice of television shows. Susan suggested I reduce my hours or consider a less demanding role. "Your children need you," she repeated. I tried to remain calm, but the intrusion was overwhelming. Mark attempted to mediate, but his efforts were half-hearted. One evening, after a particularly tense dinner, I confronted them. "I appreciate your concern," I began, "but this is our home, our family. Your unannounced visit and constant interference are not helping." Susan looked hurt. "We're just trying to help." "By undermining our decisions?" "By imposing your beliefs on us." George stood up. "Maybe we should leave." "Maybe you should have called first," I replied. They left the next morning, leaving behind a tense silence. Mark and I had a long conversation that night. "I should have set boundaries," he admitted. "I thought they'd come, offer some advice, and leave. I didn't expect this. We need to be a united front," I said. "Our marriage, our family, should be our decisions." He agreed. We decided to limit contact with his parents for a while, focusing on our family and rebuilding our routine. A month later, we received a letter from Susan and George. They apologized for their intrusion, acknowledging that they overstepped. They expressed a desire to rebuild the relationship, respecting our boundaries. Enclosed was a check, a generous amount. For the kids' college fund, the note read. It was unexpected. A gesture of goodwill, perhaps. We accepted the apology, cautiously. At first, I thought the check was just a peace offering. A way for Susan and George to say, "Hey, we screwed up, but here's something for the kids." I didn't cash it right away. Something felt off. A few days later, Mark got a call from his brother, Dave. I could hear the conversation from the kitchen. Mark's voice got sharp, sharper than I'd heard in a long time. After he hung up, I asked him what happened. They told Dave we were struggling, that we might split up, that they came to rescue us, he said, his face tight. Wait, I said. What? They said we're taking money from them now, like we needed them to bail us out. So that check? It wasn't a gift. It was ammunition. They were telling the whole family we were in crisis, that I had ruined everything with my job, that Mark was trying his best to hold it together. I was the villain in their story. It didn't stop there. One Saturday, we took the kids to a birthday party at a bowling alley across town. As we walked back to the car, Susan and George were standing in the parking lot. They didn't even try to hide it. Oh, we were just in the area, Susan said, fake smile plastered on her face. Wanted to check in. Check in? This happened 3 more times in 2 weeks. At the grocery store. At Ben's soccer game. Outside my hospital. Always just in the area. I was boiling. Mark finally told them to stop showing up, but they acted shocked. We're family, Susan said. We should be allowed to see the kids. Then came the school meeting. Lily's teacher emailed us asking if we'd requested a change in her after-school schedule. We hadn't. Turns out Susan had called the school, pretending to be me. She tried to reschedule Lily's pickup time to align with her preferred schedule. Because, in her words, working mothers can't always remember everything. I completely lost it. I called Susan that night. You impersonated me at my child's school? Well, someone had to step in, she snapped. It's not like you're always there. I couldn't even speak. Mark took the phone from me, told them we'd be cutting all contact, that they'd crossed a line. But I knew they weren't done. Not yet. 2 weeks later, I got pulled out of work by HR. There's been an anonymous tip about your performance, they said. Concerns about you bringing personal issues into the office. My blood went cold. It was vague. Just enough to shake things up. Nothing concrete, but HR said they had to look into it. I knew it was them. Susan had made little comments during their visit about how my long hours must be affecting my ability to think straight. I never gave her any real details about work, but that didn't stop her. I wasn't going to let this slide. I started documenting everything. Every call, every coincidence, every whisper behind our backs. Mark had been holding it together, but barely. Then came the final straw. He found out they'd been talking to Lily behind our backs, telling her things like, Daddy's trying hard, but Mommy works too much, and sometimes marriages don't work out when people get too busy. They were poisoning her. Our 10-year-old. Mark lost it. He called them and, for the first time in his life, screamed at his parents. Told them they were no longer welcome. Told them if they ever tried to contact our children again, he'd take legal action. Susan cried. George called him ungrateful, but Mark didn't care. He blocked their numbers. Shut them out. 3 days later, we got a letter in the mail. Certified. Legal envelope. They were suing us. Not for custody, thank God, but for grandparent visitation rights under Ohio state law. I couldn't believe it. We had no idea they were even considering this. But Ohio law allows grandparents to request court-ordered visits in certain situations. And since they claimed we had cut them off unfairly and their grandchildren were suffering, they had a case. It was real. It was happening. My in-laws were dragging us to court. And worst of all, it might work. We met with a lawyer, Rachel, a sharp, no-nonsense type who'd handled family disputes like this before. After hearing our story, she didn't sugarcoat it. They've built a paper trail, she said. The gift check, the school call, showing up in public, these weren't accidents. They were building a case. My stomach dropped. They're trying to paint you, she continued, looking at me as overworked and absent, and Mark as overwhelmed and unstable. Which is ridiculous, Mark said. We've never even had a fight in front of the kids. Rachel nodded. That's good. But this won't be about truth. It'll be about perception. And they've been working on that for months. Rachel advised us to cut off communication entirely and to tighten our circle. Only tell people we trust what was going on. That's when I realized something I'd been ignoring. Mark's cousin, Jenna, had been calling a lot lately, asking innocent questions. How's work been? Is Mark sleeping okay? Do the kids miss their grandparents? It clicked. She was feeding info back to Susan and George. I tested it. I told Jenna that I was thinking of stepping down from my job, just a hypothetical. 2 days later, my hospital director casually asked if I was doing okay and offered to lighten my load for a bit. They were trying to wear me down, make it true that I was slipping. Mark confronted Jenna. She didn't deny it. They're just worried, she said. They think you're ruining the family. A week before the court hearing, Lily came to me crying. They said it's my fault, she whispered. That I made Grandpa sad. She handed me a small, floral-covered notebook. Her journal. I didn't even know she had one. Inside were pages of things Susan and George had told her over FaceTime months earlier, things we never knew about. Stuff like, if your mom really loved you, she'd be around more. Your dad doesn't know how to take care of you. He's tired. Sometimes families break up, but it's not your fault. I cried that night. Mark wanted to burn the journal. I told him no. This was our weapon. 2 days before court, we got another letter from their lawyer. It included supporting documentation to show the closeness of the grandparent-grandchild relationship. Among the pages were printed screenshots of messages. Susan had forgotten to delete the timestamps. One showed a conversation with Jenna discussing coaching the kids. Another had a note from George. Even if we don't win, we'll ruin her reputation. That'll force her to leave the job. Mark's hands were shaking. We immediately forwarded everything to Rachel. She called it a gift from the heavens. This shows intent, she said. They aren't doing this for love. They're doing this for control. The day before the hearing, Mark and I barely slept. We had Lily's journal. We had their printed messages. We had documentation showing we never denied them visitation, just requested space after their behavior crossed boundaries. But the nerves were real. They were coming for our family. And they weren't doing it out of concern. They wanted to destroy me. They wanted to win. There was one person Susan had underestimated, my mom. My mother, Joyce, is 67, lives in Akron, and doesn't talk much. But she'd witnessed everything when she stayed with us for a few weeks the previous winter. She'd seen Susan belittle me, seen George snap at Mark in front of the kids, seen their constant need to correct how we lived. She agreed to testify. I've held my tongue for years, she said. But they're not getting away with this. The court hearing is next. And I'm ready. The courtroom was cold and quiet. Mark and I sat on one side, his parents on the other. Susan wore all black like she was at a funeral. George kept glaring at me like I'd stolen something. The judge was a middle-aged woman, stern face, calm voice. She looked like she'd seen it all. Susan was the first to speak. She cried. A lot. Talked about how much she loved the kids, how scared she was that they would forget her. She painted herself as a heartbroken grandma, locked out for no reason. George went next. He didn't cry. He went full attack mode. He told the judge I was career-obsessed, said I left Mark to struggle alone, claimed our kids were emotionally distant. He even called me cold. Then it was our turn. Rachel stood up and calmly handed the judge the journal Lily had kept. Then the printed emails and texts. The mood in the room shifted. The judge read a few lines from the journal out loud. Susan's words, clear as day. Your mom doesn't really care. Daddy's too tired to raise you. Maybe they'll get a divorce and you'll live with us. Susan's face turned pale. George's hands curled into fists. Then came the messages. The one from George stood out. Even if we don't win, we'll ruin her reputation. That'll force her to leave the job. The judge looked up slowly. This isn't about love, she said. This is about control. Then came my mom. Quiet Joyce from Akron. She didn't raise her voice once. Just told the truth. Said she saw Susan snap at me for making boxed mac and cheese. Saw George scold Mark for doing laundry like a woman. Saw how they twisted every kind thing into a criticism. Then she ended her statement with something simple. They didn't come to help, she said. They came to take over. After hours of testimony, the judge didn't take long. She ruled against Susan and George. No grandparent rights. No visits. No contact. Then she did something we didn't expect, she warned them. If I see anything that looks like harassment, stalking, or interference with this family again, there will be restraining orders. Mark and I just sat there, stunned. Susan burst into tears. George looked like he was going to explode. But it was over. Almost. We thought we'd just go home and rebuild quietly. But word spread fast through the family. Mark's cousin Jenna got dragged too. Her parents were furious she played spy. She tried texting us an apology. We never responded. Then something strange happened. An old neighbor from Lancaster called me. Said George had been boasting about the lawsuit before it even happened. Said he bragged that he'd make the working wife pay for disrespecting tradition. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I sent everything, every email, every journal entry, every message, to the school board where George used to sit. Turns out, he still mentored young teachers occasionally. Not anymore. They dropped him. He lost every position he held in town. Mark told me he didn't want to destroy his dad. I told him I didn't. He did. Here's the truth. I made mistakes too. I let things slide. I ignored red flags. I thought being polite would be enough. It wasn't. You can't reason with people who see your independence as a threat. You can't fix someone else's need to control your life. But you can fight back. And sometimes, the only way to stop a bully is to show them what happens when you stop being nice. It's been 6 months. No calls. No letters. No surprise visits. Mark and I are doing better than ever. Lily and Ben are thriving. I'm still at my job, stronger, sharper, and finally respected by the people who matter. And as for Susan and George, I hear their new hobby is telling strangers that we cut them off for no reason. Let them talk. They lost. We're free.